Well, hello and afternoon, everybody. Happy Friday here. The recording on the Pixel Classroom podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Ryan Reed here. And, of course, thank you for joining us. Remember to check out our different pieces and that on there and pieces, and you can subscribe to the channel. Get here. We actually have quite a few episodes coming on here. We have one here. We have an episode tomorrow, and we got 2 more coming up in this couple of weeks. So there's plenty of episodes here. I figured, why not? Let's kick off February. And speaking of February, since this is the longest short of the month, I thought I needed an awesome guest to really kick us off the podcast here today. So my guest here today, he is, of course, been a secondary principal of the year back in 2015. He was a Renaissance Educator of the Year. 2017, he earned his doctorate of educative leadership from the University of Wyoming. And he was, of course, recently inducted into the Jolson Renaissance Hall of Fame. He is a school district superintendent, speaker, author, publisher, consultant. He focuses on most in leadership, and of course he's an expert on, of course, school culture. He's sitting ready to go. My fellow tax man myself right here. I'd like to welcome the one and only Darrin Peppard to the Pixel Classroom podcast. Hey, Darrin.
Hey, Ryan, how you doing, man?
Not too bad. As we said before here, the knee's acting up, but hey, the groundhog did not see its shadow. We're expecting early spring today. So, Darrin, you're joining us from Nebraska, even though I've, hyped up Wyoming as we did before we started recording here too. But why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? What is your role in education, and what else you like to bring to school culture?
Yeah, absolutely, man. So I was in public education for 26 years. I actually started as a middle school teacher, and just absolutely loved doing that. I was a high school teacher, high school basketball coach, high school tennis coach. Left my time in Arizona, which is where I was a teacher, to go back to my home state of Wyoming, and I became an assistant principal. First, I was in charge of discipline and attendance at a high school, which is certainly a thankless job, right?
And then moved when you're the assistant principal.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then I transitioned to another assistant principal role in the same building. I was in charge of curriculum, instruction, special programs. Absolutely loved that role. Became the high school principal at that school. Was at that school for 11 years. Absolutely loved my time in Southwest Wyoming. Then transitioned into the superintendent role. I was a superintendent for 4 years in Colorado. And a couple of those were COVID years. So maybe it was 4 years of being a superintendent, but it felt like 24 years. And
my former superintendent wouldn't agree with that. It felt like he was there for years, and he felt like it was 16 years by the time he left.
100%, man. Yeah, no question at all. And, we'll talk about this, I'm sure, at a point in time during the conversation today. But as a high school principal, when I first started, I really struggled. And I was really fortunate. We got a new superintendent a little ways in. That's not the fortunate part. He was wonderful, but he retired. The new guy came in and believed heavily in leadership coaching and hired leadership coaches for all of us. And honestly, it completely transformed me having that coach, having somebody to really support me. And so going from, a guy who was just a firefighter, a guy who was just running around trying to solve everybody's problems for them as a principal, to somebody who truly was a leader of the school, I fell in love with being able to grow my leaders and support my assistant principals, my department heads, my aspiring administrators that were in my school. And so towards the tail end of my time as a superintendent, I had written the first edition of my book and started doing some speaking, started doing some leadership coaching and consulting, and just absolutely fell in love with it. So about 2.5 years ago, transitioned from full-time in public education to now full-time as a leadership coach, as a speaker. You mentioned I'm an author, also run a small publishing company here called Road to Awesome. Everything we do is under the Road to Awesome umbrella. And now I'm all over the country working with leadership teams from Nevada to New York, from Texas to Nebraska, and a lot of stops in between. And absolutely love doing that work. Love having the opportunity to work with individual school leaders, individual district leaders, and also with leadership teams, just to help them really get some clarity, really walk in their purpose, and honestly just fall in love with their job again, because it's a tough time to be a leader, tough time to be an educator.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I mean, many people know that I just recently completed my instructional coaching certificate just a couple weeks from Northern, because like I said earlier, I get all my stuff from Northern.
Yeah,
Why
common thread there. Yeah,
by Huskies for life. But I think that's very interesting, because I started my career kind of as a technology facilitator, which was basically a low-level instructional coach before that was actually considered much of a con thing. But what's the difference between being a leadership instructional coach and being the standard instructional coach? I think many people do not understand. I know my former principal was going to get hers for instructional coaching, but she ended up becoming the leadership coach for my former district. So what is the difference between the two, and what is where is it the plan when you're working with that more in leadership versus when you're working with just teachers?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I think a big part of leadership coaching is working with the individual leader and I already touched on it, but to really gain that clarity about what really is important to them, and to help them not only improve their individual leadership, but to help them kind of bridge that gap between that early transition from the classroom to leadership, and then also just kind of figuring out, how do I take a grand vision of my school, of my district, and help everybody take ownership, feel that ownership of what it is that we're trying to accomplish. It's, as an instructional coach, I think often you're really dialing in on specific instructional techniques, or you're diving into supporting people around taking information, taking data, and turning that into actionable steps. As a leadership coach, we're certainly doing some of that, but it's really about helping leaders move from just being the constant firefighter to actually leading their school, to actually doing that work that is beyond what most people think of with the principal. So maybe I should have led with this. A lot of people, I think, when you talk about being a principal, they're like, oh man, I wouldn't want to do that job. I wouldn't want to deal with, I don't want to deal with naughty kids. That's not the principal's job. That's a tiny piece. Discipline is certainly a tiny piece. But to think that that's what a principal's role is, would be to equate that to, in the classroom, all your job is classroom management. There's a million more things that you do. The classroom management piece is just this tiny little bit. And I think so many leaders, myself included, when you transition from being a classroom teacher to being an administrator, you transition because somebody came along and they tapped you on the shoulder and they said, hey, you really should go into leadership. You really should be an administrator because you've excelled in the classroom. But the skills are not the same, Ryan. They don't necessarily transfer. And so much of what I do is helping young or struggling administrators kind of, I guess, tease that out and get real clear around, where am I good, where am I struggling, and what are some things that I can do to improve my own abilities as a leader. And I provide kind of that third point perspective. So, I'm not the person working in the building every day. I'm not the person who is evaluating all of those teachers. So if I was in a school here in Omaha today. I'm in classrooms with the building principal. I don't evaluate those teachers, but I can certainly give my perspective, and I can ask really good questions about what they see. So that's a really long-winded answer. But I think the biggest difference is helping leaders to really get focused on what matters and learn how to balance that world of organizational management and instructional leadership and really bring it all together so that they can be effective in their role.
And I think it's a good point. I had an administrator several years ago. He was a fantastic classroom teacher. They offered him, then he became principal. He didn't really take very well to the principal job, and he was a basketball coach too. He left that school and he went to be a dean of students, and he was considered one of the best dean of students they had in like 8 years, even though it was kind of like medium, like they didn't call him like a bad principal, they didn't give him a horrible principal. He was in the middle, he got where it was, he put the discipline where he had to, or where he had to cover things. But then he became a dean of students, and it was a whole different universe versus one of my former assistants principals. Leadership since day one. They said he was fantastic in the classroom. He was on the football field as a coach. He still does coaching, all 4 of his kids. He was area 2. And then he just continued to work on that leadership completely throughout. And then unfortunately, I saw one years ago, and this wasn't my school, it was a different school, fantastic in the classroom. They became an assistant principal and they did okay. And then the principal retired and they said, well, we might just give it to them. And they didn't do very well. In fact, a year later, they actually resigned from the position, even though they weren't there, but there was just too much back hit. And they're just like, I can't do this job. I thought I could, and I can't do this job.
100%. Well, and I would tell you, when I transitioned from the assistant principal role to the principal role, so I mentioned, the role I was in charge of curriculum, instruction, special programs. I was the instructional leader of our school. My predecessor, fantastic guy, fantastic principal, but he was much more old school and very hands-off instructionally. He delegated that. That was my role. And I was very comfortable with that. I was very good at it. And when I interviewed for the job, I remember asking the superintendent, at the interview table, we've all sat in the hot seat.
Oh, yeah.
I asked him, hey, what would you expect of me? If I get to be the principal. And I can't tell you what the other people at the table said, but I know my superintendent looked at me and said, Darrin, I need you to be the instructional leader of the school. Ryan, I already was. And I'm like, okay, so what does that mean? Then he offers me the job. Cool, yay, I'm accepting the job. And then it started to soak in. Okay, so I already was the instructional leader. Does that mean keep doing everything that I was doing and be the principal and just figuring out what really is my role? That whole first year, holy cow, man. I'm telling you what, I call it Superman syndrome, but that's what I was suffering from. I thought I had to be everything to everybody. I had to be, the one who solves everybody's problems. I had to answer everybody's question. I'd be the smartest person in the room every single time. And that's what a lot of leaders fall into. That's that trap that we kind of get stuck in, and we think, oh man, I just have to do it all. And the reality is, and this is where I think I'm really good at being that leadership coach because I've lived this. That's not what it's about. It's about, leaning into the strengths of everybody around us, being able to delegate well, being able to stay focused on what really matters. And that's when I had a leadership coach, that was the big thing that I learned, that all of the success that came after within our school that I got to be a part of, a big chunk of that was I was able to get out of my own way, stop trying to do everything for everybody, and really trust the great people I had around me. And right now, so many leaders, we've seen this pretty heavy exodus from superintendents, from building principals over probably the last 3 or 4 years. And so we have a lot of leaders that are fairly new in their roles that they're all trying to figure that out at once. And, that's a big challenge,
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, years ago, I became the tech director / educational manager at one of my former schools, and it was just me, but I was also doing enrichment for the grade levels. I was doing it for the middle school. I was tech person. I was fixing this. I was doing contracts. And it was really hard. They said, like, Ryan's wearing all the hats. He's not wearing a lot of hats. He's wearing all the hats. It took me a good few months, and it took me a couple of crazy classes followed by some very quiet ones versus some crazy months and some slower months. And I think it was around the last 3 months I was there, because then I had to leave because of budget cuts, because it was a charter school. But it was like the last 3 months I finally realized, like, if I delegate this and I get out of my own way and really just focus on what needs to be done before I'm teaching those kids. Because then Saturday mornings I'd be up at 5, 6 in the morning. I'd grade the paper. So I was like, it was like a routine. I'd be up before everybody else. Family would be asleep. I'd be done in 2 hours. And it was much easier to do it that way too. But I got into that system. And my biggest thing is I got to get out of the way. I got to get out of the way of myself. Right. And there was also times where it's like, it's quiet, why don't I take that quiet time just to have the quiet time? Like, I don't need to be, oh, I need to get that billing. I need that. I'm like, let's use that quiet time. Let's sit down and see what's coming up that I can start now. That's not going to make me stress out in 2 days. Like, I worked on that. I would
But
be able to
that's
get
a huge piece right there. That's huge. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I don't want to let that go. That's something I think a lot of leaders learn, and it has such an incredible impact on the culture of a school when the leader is running around like everything is on fire. Everybody else will run around like everything is on fire. When leaders can slow down, or even kind of have that, like, that below the waterline kind of thing, where everything looks calm up here, like a duck in the water. Everything is calm up here. I might be paddling like crazy down here.
Right.
But when leaders can have that calm about them, everybody else will be that way. When the leader's running around frantic and just disorganized and just unsure and trying to just do it all, that's the feeling that, like, I mean, I'm sure you've heard before, if the principal sneezes, the whole school gets a cold.
Oh, yeah.
It's the same thing. If the principal's like this bag of stress, that's how everybody else ends up feeling. And it's just way too important. I mean, people they've got to find exactly what you just talked about. Just find those moments of calm and the moments of quiet and just, yeah.
In my current school, because like I said, we're block schedule, but like the morning, then I do breakfast and then I go to the thing. But usually first hour, it's my plan period. This final semester is I'm in my room and I'm working on things, or I'm checking some things for the next couple of days. It's like it's like a morning like that. That's lets me get ahead. But like on my A days, which fourth hour is my plan period. Once I get everybody out of the way, I actually get up and walk. Of course, today was a limping walk, as I was joking. Everyone's like, "Are you okay?" Are you okay?
Right, yeah.
You're like, you were jumping around an hour and a half. Go, yeah, an hour and a half. But I just say, I need to get away from my room for a little bit. I need to get away from the computer screens. I need to get away from my desk. I need to stand up. And I also do it because I do it because I do check with people. I sometimes will go to other classrooms and I will observe them just to get some input on mine. So I'll get maybe a meeting or something, or I do my media section. I'll talk to the meeting director if she's not in a meeting at that time of the day. And like today, I like to go to my culinary arts because they're cooking. And today they were doing homemade noodles. They were doing the homemade sauce. And I'm like, hey, I'm Italian. I need to go into this. And I said, this is part of my diet too. So as I say, I got an aspirin and I limped my way to the other side of the school. Yeah. And I was there, but the kids like it because they're like, oh, Dr. Reed, what are you doing here? I was like, I heard what you're cooking and I'm here to check it. And I was doing samples and I said, I like this. And then what they usually do is they get the extra and they go to they're by the science hall. So they'll go to the science teachers and get opinions too. But it's just good to get away from it all. It just lets me do it, whether it was a fantastic day, the last 3 classes, or it was like, boy, those other classes, boy, today was like, boy, this was pulling teeth day, or like, boy, if it wanted to go wrong, it wanted to go wrong. It's like, I just need to get away from it for like 15 minutes. Then I say, okay, I'm going back to work, and then I'll go back to my room. I'll sit down, I'll grade, I'll get things planned, and then I wait for study hall, and then away we go. But yeah, I've learned a lot. It's just good to get up. And sometimes the kids are always saying like, oh yeah, Dr. Reed, I see you don't stay in your room after this class over. Like, no, I need to get out. I need to get out. I need to stretch it. And I said, now, if there's a lot of stuff to do, then yes, I'm going to sit myself down and say, yeah, I'm going to get this graded. And maybe the last 20 minutes I'll get out, do my little checks, bathroom, a little drop things, and then I'll get ready for study hall. But it's like, I tell the kids, like, I need to get out. I need to get it. I need to take a breath. I need to do it. I said, this is my plan period. This is my time. My administration doesn't bother me. I'm not the only teacher that does this. And it's like, it's just me to get out, and I need to do it because it's good. Even if I have a fantastic day, it just feels good to take stride. Like, boy, what a great day in the class. I mean, this was an awesome day, and I'm just gonna just get out and just smile and just do it, and then I'm gonna come back and do it over after that.
Well, but that's so good for your own mental health, you just got to get up and move your body sometimes, even if it's, just go for a short walk, or, definitely, I mean, you've clearly got it figured out. I mean, this is like one of the most important things in any school that has a culinary arts program is know what they're cooking and when they're doing it. Right. I mean, if you can figure that out, and when they're doing the noodles and that kind of stuff, man, you've got it figured out really, really well. And you just happen to get up and move around, as part of the process. But it's too easy to get stuck at your desk. whether you're a classroom teacher, whether you're an administrator, whether, no matter what your role is, it's way too easy to get stuck at your desk. Even in what I do now, when I'm at home, I'm sitting right here at this desk most of the time, and I've got to force myself to get up and go move around a little bit too. It's just too important, right?
Yeah, it is. And speaking of roads taken here, let's move on over to a certain book as well. Another publishing as you did here, and the old Road to Awesome here, the Journey of a Leader, which I have to say I've read a couple pages. I'm going to buy the full version book. Everybody knows it too. I have so many teacher books, and I've been joked at from George Corus to Dave Burgess. Like you're the one person I think owns the most educational books out there, Ryan, and it's shocking how it is. And even Brian Epistles say it's like, oh, Ryan, I am just surprised how many books you read. I'm like, yep, I'm getting ready, but sometimes the budget's there and sometimes not. But it's like I've got my list, and trust me, once everything clears, I go down this list. So what is the Road Off? You were talking about how you wrote the first edition. It's now on its second edition, actually, if you check this out too. Yeah. But what is the Road to Awesome? And what went into the first edition, and what led to now the second edition? Because second edition usually means things have been updated. I got Hacking Classroom Management first edition and the second edition because it was updating things. But really, what led to the Road of Awesome? What is under the publishing company, and what can we expect now from the second edition versus what the first edition was?
Yeah. So the Road to Awesome comes back to a core story that's in both books. And it's really that moment in time for me that it really all changed as a leader, as an educator, heck, as a human being. I mentioned that I was in charge of discipline and attendance when I first got to the high school, where eventually I became principal. And in truth, we had a pretty toxic culture. And I didn't realize that, but we just did what we did. And our thing was we focused on all the things that people did wrong. And it was when you're focused on the negatives, it's easy to find them. And we were just like, our leadership strategy was punishment to gain compliance. That's really what we were all about. And we're in a staff meeting at a point in time early in that, or in the middle of the first year that I was there. And we're trying to solve, what we probably thought were the, two most important issues in education at the time. What are we going to do about hats? What are we going to do about cell phones? We were in that staff meeting. And, really important stuff.
Been there and done that, yes, and we're still a little.
We all have, right? And we're somewhere between, buy the calculator things and put them on the wall, and my shop teacher who said, just let me crush one cell phone with a hammer, they'll get the message. And
sounds like my shop teacher.
Yeah, probably all of them, but but one of the educators in the room raised a hand, and she said, Darrin, why does it always have to be about what they do wrong? Like, why can't it be about what they do right? And to me, that was that two roads diverged moment. And it certainly didn't name the road at the time, and I don't think it necessarily dawned on me at the time, but that was a real pivotal moment. For me, it was a pivotal moment for our school, for our school's culture. And ultimately, for most of us, it caused us to really start to change what we were really looking for. Instead of looking for the negatives, we started to look for the positives. And the culture of our school transformed from, really a negative place to a place where we really were recognizing, rewarding, and reinforcing the positives. And that didn't mean we still didn't have discipline referrals. We did.
Right.
But that wasn't the focus. That wasn't what it was all about. Instead of me starting my day looking around in the hallways for kids doing things wrong, I started showing up at the front door and greeting kids at the front door. Not a landmark kind of thing. A lot of people do that, but I wasn't doing it, and I needed to. So the book itself kind of talks about that journey and how we really transformed a school from a school that was, honestly, we were struggling. We really, really were. Our grad rate was poor. Attendance was poor. Our academics were poor. We had a lot of kids doing things really well. We had a lot of teachers doing things really well. We just weren't looking for it. And so the more we started to look at that, the more we started to really pour into that, it really transformed the school. And there was a moment in time when one of the teachers that I hired kind of late in my time there, he and I worked together the last 3 years, but an absolute education rock star, a guy named Bradley W. Skinner. Bradley and I presented at a conference together, and somehow we landed on calling our journey the road to awesome. To this day, we don't really remember. I think he would tell you I came up with the phrase. I think he might have come up with it, but road to awesome became our thing, and it became our hashtag at our school, and it just continued to grow. And so when I wrote the first edition of the book, that was the title, was Road to Awesome. And then we reacquired the rights to the book about a year and a half ago with our own publishing company.
Right.
And at that point in time, I really felt like, post-COVID, there were some things that I wanted to update this book. Just one simple example. So in the book, I talk about 6 things that were really important to me as an instructional or as a school leader. The 6 things that by working with my leadership coach that were my clarity. And post-COVID, I felt like, those things had kind of changed for me. And so I wanted to make that adjustment to the book, and updated, actually quite a bit of stuff in there. But having the opportunity to do a second edition was great. We're excited the book is out. It's been out for almost a year. We're just a few days actually away from its book birthday. It's sometime in February. I don't remember the exact date. I should, but I don't. I know it's in February.
Reasons why we did this episode, book birthday time, rebirthday.
Hey, there you go. Yeah. Happy book birthday.
Exactly.
RTA.
There we go.
So,
we'll just do that too. No,
yeah.
I think I got one in there too. Let's do. There we go. There we go.
Hey, there we go. Love it.
It's a reason why I got this brought up here just for the sound effect. I think
That's
it's
good.
a really.
I love it.
I think there's a really good. You brought up a great point here, and I think this can go either way. But I think you like it when you said when somebody said, "Hey, Darrin, why are we not focusing on what we're doing well in the school?" But like you said, there's still discipline. Some schools want to say, "Well, maybe if we just don't talk about the negative and just say completely about the opposite, it's good." I'm like, yeah, but it does it. Then you're kind of got a narrative, and then it's some people like, "We're always awesome. We're always like, look at our thing, look at our awards, look at our." That's great. Is it perfect? Well, no. What are you doing to work on the things that aren't working for a school? Well, that's a good question. Or some people are like, hey, we're working on this. We're working on that. That's even better. It's like, okay, you're working. But then it's like, okay, you're working on the negative. What's the awesome right now in your school? Well, that's a good point. It's like it's like sometimes it goes one end of the street or the other. Like we're always talking about what awesome, but then we're not going to talk about the negative. But then we're say, hey, we're going to address all the negative, but then we're not talking about what is really going well for us too. And it's like you said, it's that healthy balance and what turns it around. I mean, I know a school I worked at years ago, it had a really poor discipline issue. This was years ago. And it completely turned around because they said, you know what? They were addressing the negative. They were saying, yeah, we got to work on this. We got to fix it. But then everybody's like, well, what's going well for the school? And people went, oh, that's a good point. What is going well for us right now? Like we're addressing all this. And they even show like test scores turn around, suspensions turn around, expelling rates turned around. But then they were like, well, that's great. But what else is going well for the school? And people were like, it's that. You got a point there. And then some people are like, hey, we got a basketball. Hey, we're on Scholastic boat. We're here. It's like, oh, what do you do about the people who aren't doing well? We're like, well, we don't like to talk about that very much. I think some people want to focus on one side of the other. Like I said, everybody wants to focus on the bad, but they don't want to focus on the positive. Or they want to focus completely on the positive, but they don't want to talk about the bad. Or say like, hey, we're doing really well with this, but we're working on this and it's getting better. Like I know one of my previous school, they were having a lot of, assignments not turned in, like you said right there, attendance was issue. So they implemented a new program and it started turning things around. But at the same time they're like, hey, we got championships. Hey, we're going to state for the third time. We got FFA and FBLA. They're doing state champions. So it was kind of like, well, you're kind of in the middle. So you know what? That's awesome. Why do I want to talk about your school some more? So they kind of found that balance and they knew like, hey, it's not perfect, but we're doing really well too.
Right. Well, and to me, that's one of the big keys in the culture of your school is, what are you looking for? And then are you actually celebrating those things? When I work with schools now, whether it's working with leadership teams or professional development for an entire school, that's one of the places we're going to go is right what you just talked about. What are the things that are going well? because it's easy to talk about the negatives. It's easy to focus on the negatives, right? I mean, it's just one of those things that we do. Yeah, I mean, honestly, right now we're in a society that, blame is the national pastime. I mean,
Yeah, sadly.
we've bypassed baseball. We've gone right to blame as our national pastime. And so when you blame, you're looking for negatives, right? You're looking for the things that are wrong, as opposed to just focusing on what's good. And so that's something I push with schools and with leaders is let's start with what's good, because I want them to work on building that mindset of looking for the positives, but not exactly how you talked about it, not to the point where we're ignoring negatives. I don't want that toxic positivity. It doesn't benefit anybody. But we do need to be talking about the narrative of our school and how that narrative is, here are the great things happening in our school. We talked about at our school that we were traveling the road to awesome. And we got questions about it all the time. I loved it. I mean, I did so many radio interviews and just sat and talked with parents and that kind of stuff. And people would ask, what does that really mean? And to me, it's like every single one of us, we're on a journey. We're all traveling. We're all going somewhere. Why wouldn't we want to go someplace awesome? And so, ultimately, let's focus on doing the things and talking about the things that are taking us to a great place, as opposed to just everything that's broken, everything that's, just not perfect. So I can riff on this for hours because, those two questions, seriously, Ryan, I mean, they changed me. They changed how I look at things. And to be honest with you now, I mean, I would say, over the last couple of years, we've distanced ourselves from, some people that are a little bit negative, distanced ourselves from, just kind of some negative situations because, we're all on a journey. Why would we want to be stuck, in a part of a journey that's just all negative and nasty and that kind of stuff. Let's focus on where we're going and let's focus on the good things that are happening along that way.
Yeah, I think that's a very important thing. I mean, myself too. It's like, I have issues and I have bad days, and I'm just like, man, I don't know why this never wants to go right, or why do I always have to deal with this in this class specifically. But at the same time,
Right.
as people will see it, I will go in those classrooms no matter what, whether it's my best or my okay classes. And I still go in there like I'm excited. I remember the other day I was talking to my one class. They're like, Dr. Reed, why are you so excited? I'm like, this is my favorite chapter in this unit. Like, you seem to have a favorite chapter for every unit. I'm like, I know. And I'm like, and some things I teach, I'm always excited about because it's like, it's great. And then sometimes I'm like, guys, just so you know, this is probably going to be the one where you're going to hate me talking. It's not the best chapter. I teach it because you need to know it and it works for everything else. But you know what? I'm going to make it to work the best I can. But I'm going to tell you right now, I can understand some of you are going to glaze over right now because it's happened. I'm sorry. Because unfortunately it contains that material. It's like I've done my best to spruce this up as amazing, from the assignments to our exit tickets to how it'll work on our next project. Great, but it's like, you know what, guys, this is probably gonna be the most painful assignment. Sorry about it, but let's do it. Let's jump on in and do it. But it's like it happens. Like I talk about forecasting marketing. I'm like, guys, this is probably the most painful assignment you're gonna have right now today. It's gonna make sense in the long run. But this is more, and then there's I do that for all classes. Like there's just one where it's like, this is gonna be that one where it's just like, oh boy.
Right. It's not about avoiding that or pretending that the negative, or the challenging stuff isn't there, but it's definitely learning from it. And, in the classroom right now, I mean, I think when we get to those types of situations, sometimes it's just, we just have to learn that we can do hard things. We just have to learn that we can persevere, that we do have, the ability to push through and get to the favorite part, but maybe it's just not right around the corner.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. Actually, I think I'll probably use that line like, "Hey, around the corner. Once we get around this corner, it's going to be fantastic." Or you'll see where it pays off later on and everything else too. It's just it is, and it's like I've taught several classes over the year. I mean, I remember when I was just doing the administration job and I was doing an enrichment class, but I would come up this one. It was important to learn because it built off, scaffolded nicely off a previous assignment, and later on it paid off. And I was just like, oh, they're going to be biting their lips like, oh, I just don't want to do this anymore. Please make it stop. But then once we got over that hurdle, they were like, oh, this is why we learn. Oh, now it makes all sense. But it was just like, I remember the one, it was a type of coding class, but a reason so they could understand their angles and stuff. Because then once they got to the next part, they loved it. But it was just like, they were biting their teeth like, Dr. Reed, I hate math, or, oh, I hate geometry. I'm like, I know. And I'm the first to admit I'm not the best at math. And they look at me like, you not like math? I'm like, I didn't say I didn't like math. I just said I'm not the best at math. But trust me, 2 days from now, you're going to be very happy about that. And sure enough, 2 days ago, they were like, oh yeah, that makes sense now. I mean, today I was doing keyboard shortcuts, showing them the difference between here's how a keyboard works on a PC, here's how it works on a Chromebook, and they earned a badge and everything. But I had a couple students say, well, why are we learning this? I'm like, trust me, you're going to really do it. And they went, believe it or not, the next class, and they were doing something, and in their class, teacher came over to them, and they're like, oh, wow, you're really flying through that. And she's like, oh, yeah, I learned some shortcuts in Dr. Reed's class. Like, oh, yeah, those are some good things. But she's like, oh, you're doing it really fast in the Chromebook. I was like, oh, he made us learn the Chromebook and the PC. And she went, really? And sure enough, she was like, wow, you're right. That made my work time like half the time, just learning how, like, oh yeah, instead of moving my crack pads, like, okay, control, double click, control plus bracket. Okay, there we go. Font size. And then the teacher said, like, okay, double space. I said, oh, really? She goes control A. She's like, control F2. Boom. There we go. Double space. And they looked at her like, what?
I think I could use some of those shortcuts too. That's not a strength of mine.
I'm good at some, and then some I am old fashioned. But like I said, and I'm on a Mac here, so it's like I said, in the perfect world, guys would do all three. It's like, here's a Mac, here's a PC, and here's a Chromebook, and just do it. And then I made them do a Google slide. It was on a Google slide, kind of like a mix and match. Like, okay, this is the shortcut. What does it do? And then like it might be simple as makes the text darker. Oh, it's Control B, bold it. But then on the last, I said, I want you to take two. Give me the difference between what it is on PC and one thing. Like, Control D was an example. So Control D duplicates on Google. Control D, if something's selected in Word, it deletes it. So that was like, it's the same command, but it's different. And then I said, now do Control D on your browser. Like, oh, it's bookmarking. I said, yeah, see, and even those commands function different on a browser. So it was a nice little thing, but a lot of them never knew it. And they were like really surprised. Right. And I said, Dr. Reed, how do, like, I do this, it toggles through on a Chromebook, and then it toggles through my my pages on this. What does it do on this? I said, hit the button and find out. And she went, oh, that highlighted the web address. I'm like, yep, that's how it works. It's like on the other ones, it toggles. This one, it highlights. But she's like, that's so much faster than double clicking. I said, I know, isn't it?
Like learning a whole bunch of different languages right there.
Yeah, in this case, it's computer language, but I think that's a thing, because many do wonder, like, why am I learning this? I had a student years ago. Every single class was, why am we learning this? Why are we learning this? She went and do a community college, and then she found out, like, oh, they're like looking at her like, oh, wow, you know this really fast. She's like, oh yeah, my one teacher makes us do it. And they're looked at him like, you have a great teacher. Do not ignore him, because apparently he's doing it right. Now, she told me this. I'm like, I think that was the nicest thing I've heard in a long time.
It's great when you get that kind of feedback, though, right? I mean, that's the interesting thing about being an educator is, you invest and invest and invest, and sometimes you get the payoff, and sometimes you never see the payoff, or maybe it's 20 years down the road. Yeah. When a kid reaches out, or something like that, you run into them somewhere, and and they introduce you to their kid. I mean, you just never know.
Yeah, this was my first year where a former student of mine was now a teacher, so it was kind of like, oh, this was full circle. All of a sudden, they were my coworker, and I just went, wow, that's finally happened. Why many of my people?
That is so cool.
I changed careers. I've only been doing this for 15 years, and like some of them have already been 20 or longer. They went right into school and continued to do. But some of them were like, hey, I'm on my third kid that's now doing. It's like, oh yeah, wait until I have my first kid who it's like I was a first grade teacher. Now that's like that kid is now their son just came in. So how old do you think I feel? I went, well, I've never gotten to that point yet. So.
Yeah, I had a couple. That popped up today. On Facebook, it'll show, hey, it's so and so's birthday today. It's so and so's birthday today, and I looked, and two of my former students are on there, and they turned 39 today, and I'm like, no, that's not okay. That's just not okay. I find that mind-boggling, and they're not the oldest ones. I had kids before I had those kids. I mean, holy cow.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. Like, guys, I don't friend you or follow you on anything until you've graduated. It's just how it is. It's like even if I leave the school, it's like, nope, until you're graduated, I'm not doing it. But I had one the other day, and they were welcoming their second kid. I went, second kid. It was like, wait a minute. And then I had another one where it's like, and I just did this and everything. Like, wait, you're 24? Like, you were 12 the other day. How do you mean you're 24?
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah. Well, so I'll share this one with you. And this one, I love this one. This has been so much fun. So, two of my former students are, well, many are, but two in particular are married to each other and have a couple of kids. The one, he played basketball for me, and he reached out last year. And he's like, Coach, I got asked to coach a junior high basketball team. And when I first started coaching him, I coached him in junior high. Then I had him at the high school level as well. And he's like, it's just, wow, I'm wondering about this. And he just, started running X's and O's and all this kind of stuff by me. And well, his son is on the team. And this year, in fact, tomorrow, his son's team will play their end of season tournament. They're the number 2 seed. They're all excited about this tournament, but he has been reaching back over the last year and a half, just every now and again with, Coach, tell me about this, or what do you think about this? And, hey, I've got this idea of how I want to, attack this one team, and, all this just really, really neat stuff to hear one of my former athletes, he was in my class too, just picking my brain about that. It's just really been a cool full circle moment. And actually got a message from him this morning just saying, Coach, I can't tell you how much I appreciate, the last 2 seasons being able to just reach out and share thoughts with you. And I can't wait to watch my son play his final games tomorrow as a junior high student. And I just told him, I'm like, Brian, just go enjoy the moment, man. Go enjoy the moment. And man, you got to love those moments. That's why we do what we do.
Yeah, I absolutely agree too. I had my last year, my previous school director, he went into the military and he had just gotten out, but I had missed him, and he wrote me a whole page. And and it was so funny because he always loved it, because he would come in during his study hall to rehearse on something. So he'd come in, and I said, oh yeah, I'm in here. I'm like, come in, Derek. I'm fine. And he would sit there and we would talk, but he would always be working on stuff. But we'd be like, so too. But then, like I said, my last year there, just before I left, they said, oh yeah, he left, and Dr. Reed's going to be leaving the district. And he's like, okay, I got to write this out because I don't know the time. And he had a long list about things, but he also said too, he's like, I still hate you for making me learn sketch notes, but I found out they actually worked in when I went into the job, because a lot of people had to draw things out. And I said, darn it, why did you make me do that? Because I hated it, and I just took notes the old-fashioned way. And then I ended up using what you had. So you are a really great teacher, because you made me do things I didn't like, and I ended up finding out I had to use them later in life, even though I thought it was absolutely useless. And then he signed that up, and I still have the letter. I mean, it's downstairs in my smile file in my fireproof in my basement by my collection area where I keep everything. And it was just like, that brought a tear to my eye. I was like, wow. But I remember us. Yeah. I did lunch duty. I walked up to him and I said, how did those go? And he's like, Doc, he's like, Mr. Reed, because I didn't have my doctorate. And he goes, Mr. Reed, I'm sorry, I have to take notes the old-fashioned way. And I do. And you see me take them in class. He's like, this is just how I do. I like the idea, but I'm never going to use that. Flash forward 3 years later, and he used it. And he was kind of like, oh. But I just like how he wrote it in his note too. And it was really a good.
That's really cool. Right. I call those bamboo moments. When I was a science guy, so you'll just have to bear with me a little bit here. But the Chinese bamboo plant, the first 4 years that the seeds have germinated, you don't see anything above the ground. It's just all root development and that kind of stuff. And then in year 5, that plant will sprout and it'll grow 80 feet in 6 weeks. I mean, it's just an amazing plant. And that's exactly what we do, right? Like, for years and years, we're working on that infrastructure, that root system. And then, years later, here's the payoff. And sometimes we get that payoff and sometimes we don't. But when we have those bamboo moments, when somebody reaches back out and shares a story with you, or, tells you, what they're doing in their life, or, man, I had somebody once reach out. Like, it'd been 20 years since I had him in class. I had him for a semester. I really didn't feel like I built a relationship with the kid, but man, he reached out and sent me a message. It was probably about 2 years ago. Just, can't tell you how much I appreciate you. Told me about all these challenges that he'd gone through in his life and how he kind of turned some things around. He was graduating to become a vet tech, and just how much he appreciated me never giving up on him. And I'm thinking, wow, just those moments in time when you have those stories where kids are like, you made an impact on me, and we don't always know those moments. Joe Sanfilippo says it really, really well. We don't get to decide which interaction a person remembers us for. And man, when kids reach back out and share those types of stories, that's a big part of what we do. And, you're ultimately making a difference in the life of another human being. And those things are priceless, man. They really are.
I agree with that. I mean, you really don't, especially when you have them for, like I said, once. I mean, like I said, my former student, I only had her for one semester. I had her sisters, though. I had her one sister all 4 years, and then I had the first 2 years of the other one here before they left. So, but I had made enough. I had made it. I mean, she'll probably, I don't know if she'll deny this or not, if she's listening, who knows. But I mean, it was interesting how she did say, like it was that and was it feel thing. And I felt like I didn't do enough with her versus her sister, who all 4 years helped her with a scholarship. She loved coming to me. She loved me as teacher. Their youngest sister loved me and was really sad when I left, because she said, well, you don't get to finish up my high school career. I'm like, I'm sorry. It's just like, the situations, and I'm leaving right now on my own core. But it was interesting when we met each other that first day. And another thing, and I'll stop by her room. I don't stop by her room all the time, but her and I will have an interesting talk. And I remember her even saying one thing to me too, is like, she's like, why do you check up on me? Like, you're still my student. And sometimes I just want to make sure you're okay. And I think she needed to hear it that day. She really did. So, but it was like one of those moments too, where I just said like, hey, you're still my student. I still like to check up on you once in a while. And I've done that. I've run into people, places. I had one student a couple years ago, sadly, not a great story, dropped out, got his GED. I ran into him by accident, just stopping by a store, and I said, hey, how are you? And he's like, I loved your class, Dr. Reed. I know I wasn't the best student, but I loved your class, and I never wanted, and I know things didn't work good for me when I left the school, but he's like, you and so, and like, he named like 5 of us teachers. Like, I loved you guys as teachers, and I'm sorry I didn't do better for you guys. He's like, because he realized he didn't do it at that point. But it was kind of a moment where it's like, I don't hear that. You hear that, and you're like, man, I don't know what went wrong with that girl or that boy. And to see him, completely by accident, it was good. He was doing well for himself. I don't know where he is. I haven't seen him in a couple of years, but it was nice that he just said that, like, hey, you and these other teachers, I loved your classes, and I'm sorry, I didn't meet those, what you guys were expecting out of me, or just what the school was expecting out of me. And he just, he kind of moved on from there. And, it was a story like that, but I have to say it was very impactful. I mean, to just hear him say that. So it's something you don't hear a lot.
Right. Yeah. No, that's good, man. I love those stories. It just, we could go on and on and on with those.
Oh, that's what I mean too. Darrin, this has been great. I mean, this whole time, I know we got other things coming up too, but what do you got coming up for you here for, what's the next side road to the road of awesome there coming up here?
Yeah. So, well, lots of stuff happening here, obviously, with the publishing side of our business. We've just released a whole bunch of new books. Last year, we've got some new books coming this year. I'm in the process of writing a new book right now. I'm actually partnered with another just wonderful educator and author. Katie Kinder and I are writing a book together on classroom culture. We have the next book we have coming out. Coach Kurt Hines has an incredible book called Called to Empower that'll be out probably in about the next 2 months. And then a bunch of others. We've got, 8 or 10 new books that'll come out through Road to Awesome during the course of this calendar year. And, Yeah, I mean, the podcast continues to grow. There, you can see as you're scrolling through
Yeah,
a whole bunch of
I'm trying to go through.
of the books that we've published over the last couple of years, and just some amazing educators. I'll tell you this work here, and this is, I guess, maybe a unique piece with Road to Awesome. We're just a family business. Myself, my wife. My wife does all of the work on the book side. She's the editor, the art director. I mean, she does all the book construction. She does a brilliant job with it. But one of the really cool pieces with this is just getting to build the relationships with these individuals and to hear their stories. Everybody's got a story, and they need to be. They need to be out there. They need to be shared. And that's a beautiful part of the work that we do at Road to Awesome. So many wonderful books, and just, like I said, every one of them, wonderful story behind them. But yeah, for me, the big thing right now, like I said, working on a new book, and the podcast continues to grow. Leaning into Leadership is the podcast. Yep. And, yeah, just continuing to work and support school leaders all over the country. I don't remember if I said this. I think I said this before we hit the record button. I'm getting ready to jump on an airplane again on Sunday. I'm on an airplane like all the time, and actually heading back into my hometown. I'm flying back into Casper, Wyoming, where I grew up, and working with the school district in Douglas, Wyoming, which is just about 45 minutes away. And then, yeah, I'm going to be at a bunch of conferences, February, March, April, speaking at a lot of different places. The big ones, I guess, coming up, let's see. The very end of the month, I'm at the Innovative Schools Conference in New York. I'm at right after that, about a week later, I'm speaking at the Virginia Middle School Association Conference at James Madison University. Right after that, North Carolina Mid-Level Educators Conference in Charlotte, the Nebraska School Business Officials Conference in Lincoln, Nebraska in very early April, a conference called Wide Open Spaces in Oregon in mid-April, and there's more, but that's about as much as my brain can remember at this point in time. But lots and lots of travel, lots and lots of supporting leaders, and just, you know what? The Road to Awesome is awesome, and that's what I'll say.
As Sheryl Crow said, it's a winding road, as they say. And
it is. It is. Yeah,
goes back and forth.
I got a lot of frequent flyer miles, man.
Very true. It's like my brother-in-law could probably we'll talk about that. I've been here. It's like so if any of you guys are in those areas, anybody's talking about, like I said, I'll have in the show notes and the audio version, we'll have his website and everything, so you can check out the dates and everything in the podcast, the upcoming books. But Darrin, yeah, I want to thank you so much. I mean, I've listened to the episodes. I've read quite a few things of yours over the last couple of years, so I want to thank you, especially as somebody who's been back and forth and everything from leadership to classroom to might be heading back into leadership going forward here and a couple other things. But yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing here. I'm glad you're out there inspiring many of us who do need to hear it sometimes. And it's just, it's amazing the work you do. And I'm very happy you're here doing it for all of us out there.
Well, I appreciate it, Ryan. I appreciate the conversation today, man. What a great way to wrap up a week. Just sit around, talk leadership, talk education. Just certainly brought a smile to my face. And I appreciate what you're doing. I love your podcast, and, just keep on keeping on, man.
I am planning on to. It's the one thing here. I mean, like I said, I closed down the blog this past year because really I wasn't writing as much. I mean, I've talked about some other things, but the podcast has been there for me for a long time, and I don't see myself ending unless they officially just take away my equipment or something else happens. But if people ask me, like, Ryan, are you gonna keep with the podcast? Like, I don't see a reason why not to. In fact, I love going on other podcasts. That's why I do things like the Crawl Space.
It's addictive, isn't it? I mean, it is like addictive.
Like when
just the conversations.
Well, you've seen my perler beads. I will actually, when I'm working on a project, I put on an episode and I just go. And sometimes I'll work like the whole time, and sometimes I'll finish 3 projects, like listening to 4 episodes of somebody else's, from Shay and Pav to yours to aspiring to lead. So it's like people to realize, like, boy, Ryan, you read a lot of books. Like, I listen to a lot of podcasts. When do you do that? It's like when I sit down and I'm just doing it. It's just easy to listen to it. So it's
absolutely work. Yeah. Well, we'll have to get you on Leaning into Leadership for sure, man.
I'd be more than happy.
We'll turn this around, make it a true home and home.
I love it when we do that too. I know I got one I got coming up here later on in hopefully end of March where we're gonna do a switch around. So I want to do one episode and then we're gonna flip around an hour later and I'm gonna be on their episode, kind of do the little double.
That's so much fun. Yeah.
Everybody else there, I thank you for joining us today on the Pixel Classroom podcast here with Darrin Peppard, and we will see everyone later.